The rain fell
I've
in
got you,
sheets
sweetie.
against the towering glass windows
Yes,
of the
it's
Blackwood
raining. Let's
estate.
get home.
Each drop racing down the pane
I've
like
got you, sweetie.
tears on an invisible face.
Yes, it's raining.
Ethan
Let's get
Blackwood
home.
stood in his study, whiskey glass forgotten
I've
in
got
his
you,
hand,
sweetie.
watching the storm rage
Yes,
outside
it's raining.
with
Let's
the
get
same
home.
detached interest he gave to most things in his carefully controlled life. At 34, he built an empire that spanned 3 continents, but tonight, the numbers on his laptop screen blurred together, losing their usual power to captivate him. Thunder cracked across the sky, and Ethan turned from the window, running a hand through his dark hair. The estate felt particularly empty tonight, its 30 rooms echoing with a silence that even the storm couldn't fill. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, had left hours ago. The cook had prepared his dinner and departed. Only Sophia remained somewhere in the West Wing, finishing her evening rounds before she too would leave for the small apartment she shared with her daughter. Sophia Martinez. Ethan found himself thinking about her more often than was appropriate for an employer. She'd been working for him for 8 months now, arriving each morning at 7 with a quiet dignity that set her apart from every other employee he'd ever had. She never pried, never gossiped, and moved through his home like a gentle breeze, leaving everything pristine in her wake. He knew she was 28, that she'd been divorced for nearly 3 years, and that she had a daughter she rarely spoke about but whose photograph she kept tucked in her apron pocket. He'd glimpsed it once, a cherubic child with wild curls and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. The clock struck 9, and Ethan noticed Sophia hadn't passed by his study to say goodnight, as she usually did. He frowned, setting down his glass and moving into the hallway. The marble floors gleamed under the chandelier's light, and he could hear the rain battering against the east entrance. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's fury. A child's cry. Ethan's heart seized. Children didn't cry in his house. There were no children here. He moved toward the sound, his steps quickening, and then he was at the east door, pulling it open against the wind's resistance. What he saw would be burned into his memory forever. A tiny figure sat huddled on the top step, so small she seemed to disappear into the darkness. She was soaked through, her little pink dress clinging to her like a second skin, her dark curls plastered to her face. She couldn't have been more than 2 years old, and she was shaking so violently that Ethan could see it even through the rain. Jesus Christ, he breathed, and then he was moving, all his carefully constructed walls crumbling in an instant. He scooped the child into his arms, and she was so cold, so terribly cold. She looked up at him with enormous brown eyes, Sophia's eyes, and something in his chest cracked wide open. "You're Isla," he said softly, and the little girl nodded, her tiny body racked with shivers. He pulled her against his chest, and she burrowed into him immediately, seeking warmth, seeking safety, seeking something he didn't know if he could provide but found himself desperate to give. Ethan carried her inside, kicking the door shut against the storm. Water dripped from both of them onto his expensive floors, and he couldn't have cared less. All he could think about was how small she was, how fragile, how terribly vulnerable. His mind raced with questions. How had she gotten here? Where was Sophia? Why was this child wandering in the rain? But they all fell away in the face of her immediate need. "Let's get you warm," he murmured, and Isla's small arms wrapped around his neck with a trust that undid something fundamental inside him. He'd held billion-dollar deals in the palm of his hand, commanded boardrooms full of powerful men, built his fortune through sheer force of will and intellect. But this tiny human depending on him for warmth and safety, this was a responsibility that felt more important than anything he'd ever done. He carried her to the nearest bathroom, setting her gently on the counter while he grabbed towels from the cabinet. His hands, steady in negotiations worth millions, trembled as he wrapped her in the soft fabric. Isla watched him with those enormous eyes, still shivering, and when he rubbed her arms gently to warm them, she reached up and touched his face with one small, water-wrinkled hand. "Cold," she whispered, and Ethan felt his throat tighten. I know, sweetheart. We're going to fix that. The endearment slipped out naturally, surprising him. He never used such words. But looking at this child, Sophia's child, he found he meant it with every fiber of his being. He dried her as best he could, then wrapped her in his own bathrobe, which engulfed her tiny frame completely. When he picked her up again, she settled against him with a sigh that spoke of exhaustion and relief, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, some long-locked door opening to reveal a room he'd forgotten existed. "We need to find your mama," he said gently, and Isla's eyes filled with tears. "Mama working. I waked up. She not there. I scared." The words tumbled out in that halting way of toddlers, each one a knife to Ethan's heart. She'd woken up alone, frightened, and somehow made her way here through the storm. The thought of what could have happened made his arms tighten around her protectively. "Your mama is here in the house. Let's find her together, okay?" He kept his voice calm, soothing, though inside, he was anything but calm. Where was Sophia? Why hadn't she known her daughter was missing? As if summoned by his thoughts, he heard footsteps running, frantic, and then Sophia appeared at the end of the hallway. She was still in her cleaning clothes, her face pale with terror, her eyes wild. "Isla." The name tore from her throat like a prayer and a curse combined. "Mama." Isla struggled in Ethan's arms, reaching for her mother, and Sophia ran toward them, her face crumpling as tears streamed down her cheeks. Ethan carefully transferred the child to her mother's arms, and Sophia clutched Isla to her chest, sobbing openly now. "Oh, baby. Oh, my baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She kissed Isla's face, her hair, her hands, checking her over with the desperation of a mother who'd glimpsed her worst nightmare. "She's okay," Ethan said quietly. "She was at the east entrance. I found her just a few minutes ago." Sophia looked up at him, and the raw emotion in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. Gratitude, fear, shame, relief, all of it swirling in those brown depths that her daughter had inherited. "Mr. Blackwood," her voice broke. "I don't know how she was supposed to be with my neighbor. Mrs. Patterson always watches her when I work late, but she must have. I need to call." She was shaking as hard as Isla had been, though not from cold. "Breathe," Ethan said, surprising himself by reaching out to steady her with a hand on her shoulder. "Take a breath. She's safe now. That's what matters." Sophia nodded, but tears continued to fall. "I'm so sorry. This is so unprofessional. I understand if you need to, if you want me to." "Stop." The word came out more forcefully than he intended, and both mother and daughter looked at him with wide eyes. He gentled his tone. "Let's just focus on making sure Isla is okay. Come with me." He led them to his private sitting room, a space he rarely used, and gestured for Sophia to sit on the leather sofa. She did, still clutching Isla, as if the child might disappear if she loosened her grip even slightly. Ethan disappeared into his bedroom and returned with dry clothes, a soft cashmere sweater and sweatpants that would be too large for Sophia, but were the best he could offer. "For you," he said, handing them to her. "You're soaked too." Only then did Sophia seem to realize she was dripping wet, that she must have run out into the storm searching for her daughter. She accepted the clothes with a trembling hand. "Thank you." Ethan turned away to give her privacy as she changed Isla into the dry bathrobe properly and then quickly changed herself, still keeping her daughter close. When he turned back, they made quite a picture, both wrapped in his clothes, Sophia's long dark hair dripping onto the expensive cashmere, Isla's curls beginning to dry into soft spirals around her face. "Tell me what happened," he said, sitting in the chair across from them. His voice was gentle, but he needed to understand. Sophia took a shuddering breath. "Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, she watches Isla when I work late. She's done it dozens of times. But tonight, Isla must have woken up and somehow got out. Mrs. Patterson is 76, and she sleeps heavily. By the time she realized Isla was gone and called me, I'd already started searching the building. Fresh tears spilled over. I thought I couldn't find her anywhere, and all I could think was the street, the cars, the storm. Her voice broke completely, and without thinking, Ethan moved to sit beside her on the sofa. But she didn't go to the street. She came here. She came to find you. Isla, who had been quiet in her mother's arms, looked up at Ethan with those heartbreaking eyes. The big house where Mama works. I noted. The simple statement revealed so much. This child, barely more than a baby, had known to come to the place where her mother worked. In the rain, in the dark, she'd made her way here because it was where she felt safe. Because it was where her mama was. Ethan felt something crack wider in his chest, some wall he'd built years ago crumbling completely. He looked at Sophia, at the love and terror and exhaustion etched into every line of her face, and then at Isla, small and vulnerable and so trusting. And he realized, with the clarity of lightning splitting the sky, that something fundamental had shifted in his world. "You're both staying here tonight," he said, and it wasn't a question. Sophia's eyes widened. "Mr. Blackwood, we couldn't possibly." "You can and you will." He kept his voice firm but kind. "It's still storming. Isla needs rest, and frankly, so do you. I have plenty of guest rooms. This isn't negotiable." For a moment, Sophia looked like she might argue, but then Isla yawned hugely against her mother's chest, and the fight went out of her. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." As Ethan showed them to one of the guest suites, watching Sophia tuck Isla into the large bed with a tenderness that made his throat tight, he realized that his carefully ordered world had just been turned upside down by a 2-year-old girl in the rain. And somehow, impossibly, he was grateful for it. Ethan woke before dawn, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the fact that he'd barely slept, his mind too full of images he couldn't shake. Isla's tiny form on his doorstep, the terror in Sophia's eyes, the way the little girl had trusted him so completely. He'd spent hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it meant that he couldn't stop thinking about the two of them sleeping just down the hall. He gave up on sleep at 5:30 and made his way to the kitchen, something he rarely did. Usually, the cook prepared his breakfast before he even entered the room. But this morning felt different, suspended somehow, and he found himself pulling out ingredients he'd never touched before: eggs, bread, cheese, the fresh fruit the cook kept stocked. He was halfway through attempting an omelet when he heard the soft pad of bare feet on marble. He turned to find Isla standing in the doorway, still wearing his bathrobe, her curls a wild halo around her face. She clutched a stuffed rabbit he didn't recognize. Sophia must have had it in her bag. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "You're up early, sweetheart." Isla rubbed her eyes with one small fist, then looked at him with that penetrating gaze that seemed too old for her face. "You the man from the rain?" "I am. My name is Ethan. Do you remember?" She nodded solemnly. "A fan." The sound was beyond her, and somehow that made it more endearing. "You maked me warm." Something in his chest squeezed. "I did. Are you hungry?" Another nod, and then, to his surprise, she padded over to him and held up her arms in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be picked up. Ethan stood and lifted her easily, settling her on his hip as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. She weighed nothing, this little person, but the trust she showed him felt heavier than any responsibility he'd ever carried. "Let's make you some breakfast," he said, and Isla rested her head against his shoulder with a contentment that undid him completely. He'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers. He'd faced down corporate raiders and hostile boards. But making scrambled eggs one-handed while holding a toddler proved to be the most challenging task he'd ever attempted. Isla watched everything he did with fascination, occasionally reaching out to touch the bowl or the whisk, and Ethan found himself explaining each step to her as if she were a fellow chef. "Now we add a little milk, see? It makes the eggs fluffy." "Fuffy," Isla repeated, and Ethan smiled despite himself. By the time Sophia appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, Ethan had managed to produce scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced strawberries, and Isla was sitting on the counter beside him, nibbling on a piece of cheese he'd given her to keep her occupied. Sophia stopped dead at the sight before her hand flying to her mouth. She was still wearing his clothes from last night, her hair tumbled around her shoulders, and Ethan thought he'd never seen anyone look more beautiful. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know she'd gotten up. I must have been so exhausted that I—" "It's fine," Ethan interrupted gently. "She's been helping me cook. Haven't you, Isla?" "I helping," Isla announced proudly, holding up her piece of cheese as evidence. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and Ethan realized she was still processing everything from the night before. He set down the spatula and moved toward her, still holding Isla. "Sophia, breathe. Everything is okay." He kept his voice low, soothing. "You are exhausted, and you needed sleep. I promise you, we've been fine." "You shouldn't have to," her voice cracked. "You've already done so much, and now you're making breakfast and I should be—" "Mama." Isla reached for her mother, and Ethan transferred the child to Sophia's arms. Mother and daughter clung to each other, and Ethan turned back to the stove to give them a moment, his throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name. "Why don't you both sit down?" he said over his shoulder. "Breakfast is almost ready." He heard Sophia sigh, a sound of surrender, and then the scrape of a chair as she sat at the kitchen table. Ethan plated the food, then brought it over, sitting across from them. It was surreal, this domestic scene in his state-of-the-art kitchen. He'd eaten here alone thousands of times, but never like this. Never with a small child chattering between bites and a woman watching him with eyes that held too many emotions to count. "This is really good," Sophia said softly, and the surprise in her voice made him laugh. "You sound shocked. I didn't think you knew where the kitchen was, much less how to use it." "I have hidden depths." He said it lightly, but watching Isla eat the eggs he'd made, seeing the color return to Sophia's cheeks, he wondered if maybe he was discovering depths he hadn't known existed. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, broken only by Isla's occasional exclamations about her food. Then Sophia set down her fork and looked at him with an expression so serious it made his pulse quicken. "Mr. Blackwood." "Ethan," he corrected. "After last night, I think we can dispense with the formality." She took a breath. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about last night, about what happened, and about my position here." His stomach dropped. "If you're going to quit, I won't accept it." Sophia blinked in surprise. That's not what I was going to say. I thought you'd want me to leave. After what happened, the danger I put your home in by having my daughter." "Stop." Ethan leaned forward, holding her gaze. "Sophia, what happened last night was an accident. A terrifying one, yes, but an accident. You didn't put anyone in danger. You were working and your childcare situation failed through no fault of your own. But I should have. Should have what? Been able to see the future? Known that a 76-year-old woman would sleep through your daughter waking up? Known that Isla would somehow find her way here?" He shook his head. "You're not omniscient. You're just a mother doing her best." Sophia's eyes swam with tears. "I was so scared. When I couldn't find her, when I thought about all the terrible things that could have happened. But they didn't happen. She came here. She found you." Ethan paused, then added quietly, "She found me." Something passed between them then, some understanding that went deeper than words. Sophia reached across the table, her hand hovering near his, not quite touching. "Thank you. For finding her. For taking care of her. For," her voice broke, "for not being angry." Ethan did something he'd never done with an employee. He took her hand in his, feeling the calluses earned from hard work, the tremor that still ran through her fingers. "I could never be angry about this. If anything, he struggled for the right words. I'm grateful that she trusted me, that you both trusted me." Isla, who had been quietly eating her strawberries, suddenly reached out and put one small, sticky hand on top of both of theirs. "Ifan nice," she announced with the certainty of the very young. "Mama, ifan nice." Sophia laughed through her tears, and Ethan felt something in his chest expand so quickly it almost hurt. He looked at the three hands stacked together, his large and scarred from the one time he'd tried rock climbing, Sophia's smaller and work-worn, and Isla's tiny and sticky with strawberry juice, and thought that he'd never seen anything more perfect. Later, after breakfast had been cleared away and Isla was playing with some wooden spoons on the kitchen floor, Ethan found himself sitting with Sophia at the table, nursing a second cup of coffee. The morning light streamed through the windows, turning everything golden, and it felt like they existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. "Tell me about her," Ethan said quietly. "About Isla." Sophia's face transformed, love and pride chasing away the lingering shadows of fear. "She's everything." She laughed softly. "I know every parent says this, but she's extraordinary. She's so smart, so curious about everything. She asks why about 100 times a day, and she remembers everything you tell her. Last week, she asked why the sky was blue, and I tried to explain about light and atmosphere, and she actually understood. Or at least, she pretended to very convincingly." Ethan smiled, watching Isla conduct an intricate conversation between two spoons. "She seems fearless. Too fearless sometimes. She climbs everything, tries to pet every dog we meet, wants to taste everything she sees." Sophia's smile faded slightly. "That's how she got to you last night. Mrs. Patterson said she must have unlocked the door. I've been trying to teach her how, in case of emergencies, but I never thought." She stopped, swallowing hard. "Hey." Ethan waited until she looked at him. "Stop replaying the what-ifs. She's safe. That's what matters." Sophia nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. "Can I ask you something? And please be honest." "Of course." "Why are you being so kind to us? I'm just your housekeeper and Ilo is." "You're not just anything," Ethan interrupted, more forcefully than he intended. "Sophia, last night, when I saw her on those steps, something happened to me. I can't explain it. But looking at her, holding her, seeing how scared she was and how much she trusted me to make it better." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his inability to articulate what he felt. "It changed something. And then seeing you with her, the way you love her, the way you'd clearly sacrifice anything for her. I've spent my whole life around people who care about money and power and status. But you care about something real. Someone real. And I can't explain why, but I want to be part of that. Even if it's just for a morning, making scrambled eggs and watching her play with spoons." Sophia stared at him, and Ethan watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly to name. Finally, she whispered, "You really mean that?" "I really do." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound Isla's soft singing as she played. Then Sophia said, "I was married young. Too young. Michael, my ex-husband, he seemed like everything I wanted at first. Stable, responsible, kind. But after Isla was born, everything changed. He started working later and later, coming home less and less. I thought it was just stress, the pressure of being a new father. But then I found out he'd been having an affair with his secretary for over a year." Ethan felt anger rise in his chest, hot and protective. "I'm sorry." Sophia shrugged, but he could see the pain in her eyes. The divorce was ugly. He didn't want custody, barely wanted visitation. He pays child support because the court made him, but he hasn't seen Isla in over 6 months. She doesn't even really remember him anymore. She looked at her daughter, and her voice softened. "Sometimes I think that's for the best. But other times, I wonder what I'm supposed to tell her when she's older, when she asks why her father didn't love her enough to stay." "That's not on you," Ethan said fiercely. "His failings aren't yours to explain or apologize for." And any man who could walk away from either of you is a fool. Sophia's eyes snapped to his, wide with surprise. Ethan. Mama, look. Isla appeared beside them, holding up a spoon triumphantly. A poon. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them, some truth acknowledged even if not fully explored. Ethan reached out and gently tugged one of Isla's curls. That's a very good spoon. Isla beamed at him, then climbed into his lap with the unself-conscious ease of a child who'd already decided he was safe. She settled against his chest, and Ethan's arms came around her automatically, protectively. Over her head, he met Sophia's eyes and saw his own wonder reflected back at him. The morning stretched on, golden and surreal. Ethan called his assistant and canceled all his meetings for the day, ignoring the shocked silence on the other end of the line. He never canceled meetings. His schedule was sacred. But today, he couldn't imagine being anywhere but here, in this kitchen, with these two people who had somehow become the center of his universe in the span of 12 hours. They moved to the living room, and Isla explored with the enthusiasm of a child in a new playground. She examined every piece of furniture, every decorative object, asking questions about everything. What this? Why it there? Who made it? And Ethan found himself answering each one with a patience he'd never known he possessed. Sophia watched from the couch, her expression a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that made Ethan's heart race. When Isla finally wore herself out and curled up on the rug for an impromptu nap, Sophia moved to pick her up, but Ethan stopped her. "Let me," he said softly, and he gathered the sleeping child in his arms and carried her to the couch. She didn't wake, just snuggled deeper into his chest with a contented sigh. Ethan sat down carefully, and Sophia sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "She never falls asleep with strangers," Sophia whispered. "She's usually so wary of new people." "Maybe I'm not a stranger anymore," Ethan whispered back. "No," Sophia agreed, and when he looked at her, he saw tears on her cheeks. "I don't think you are." They sat like that for over an hour, Isla sleeping peacefully between them, neither adult wanting to move and break the spell. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ethan realized that this moment of stillness and connection and unexpected tenderness was more valuable than any deal he'd ever closed, any success he'd ever achieved. This was what it meant to be alive, to be human, to be part of something bigger than yourself. When Isla finally woke, she looked up at Ethan with sleepy eyes and said, "I like you how, Sofan. Can we come back?" Ethan looked at Sophia, saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the hope she was trying to hide. And he made a decision that would change everything. "How about you come back every day?" he said. "Both of you." Sophia's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have a house with 30 rooms, most of which I never use. I have a whole wing that's just sitting empty. And you," he looked at Isla, then back at Sophia. "You have a daughter who needs a safe place to be while you work. So why not here? You could bring her with you. She could play, explore, nap. You wouldn't have to worry about Mrs. Patterson or any other babysitter. You'd know exactly where she was, that she was safe." "I couldn't," Sophia started, but Ethan shook his head. "Yes, you could. And before you argue, think about this. I have a library full of books, a yard she could play in, rooms she could explore safely. I'm here most mornings and evenings, working from home." And he took a breath. "I'd like to get to know her better. To get to know both of you better." Sophia stared at him, and Ethan held his breath. Then, slowly, she smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." And just like that, Ethan Blackwood's carefully ordered life became something entirely new. 3 weeks passed, and Ethan's house transformed from a showpiece of architectural excellence into something that resembled a home. The change was subtle at first, a forgotten toy in the hallway, the sound of laughter echoing through rooms that had known only silence, the scent of Sophia's lavender shampoo lingering in unexpected places. But gradually, the transformation became undeniable. The estate that had once felt like a museum now pulsed with life. Isla arrived with Sophia each morning at 7, and instead of the quiet ritual of coffee and market reports, Ethan's mornings now included sticky kisses on his cheek, demands to read, just one more story, and elaborate breakfast negotiations. The child had become a tiny tornado of energy and joy, and Ethan found himself rearranging his entire schedule around her nap times and meal times and the sacred ritual of afternoon cartoons. "Mr. Blackwood, your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room." His assistant's voice came through his phone one Thursday morning. "I've told him you'll be there in 5 minutes." Ethan looked down at Isla, who was currently sitting on his lap, carefully coloring a picture of what she claimed was a dragon unicorn butterfly. Her tongue stuck out in concentration, and she had marker smudges on her nose. "Tell them I'll be 15 minutes, he said. Something important came up. More important than the Henderson merger? Ethan looked at Isla's face, scrunched up in concentration as she tried to stay inside the lines. "Yes," he said simply. "More important than that." When he finally made it to the conference room 20 minutes later, his tie slightly askew and his shirt sporting a small purple marker stain, the Henderson executive stared at him with barely concealed shock. Ethan Blackwood was never late. He was never anything less than perfectly put together. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for your patience. Shall we begin?" The meeting went well despite his late arrival, but Ethan found his mind wandering to the West Wing where Sophia was working while Isla played in the converted sunroom that had become her domain. He'd had his staff set it up with toys, books, a small table and chairs, cushions for building forts, everything a 2-year-old might need. The cost had been negligible, but the look on Isla's face when she'd first seen it, the way she'd gasped and whispered, "It's like a princess castle," had been priceless. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself in the sunroom doorway, watching as Sophia read to Isla. Mother and daughter were curled up together on the window seat, afternoon light streaming over them like a blessing. Sophia's voice was soft and melodic as she brought the story to life, and Isla's eyes were wide with wonder. They hadn't noticed him yet, and Ethan took the opportunity to simply observe. Sophia's hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was in her usual work clothes, but to him she'd never looked more beautiful. There was something about the way she held her daughter, the gentle patience in her voice, the love that radiated from every gesture, that made Ethan's chest ache with an emotion he was only beginning to recognize. He'd been falling in love with her. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. It had started that first night in the rain, and had been growing every day since. Every time she smiled at him over Isla's head, every time she laughed at something he said, every time she trusted him with her daughter, the feeling grew stronger. And terrifying. Ethan Blackwood didn't do love. He did business. He did strategy. He did control. But this feeling that made him want to cancel meetings just to watch a 2-year-old color, that made him dream of a future he'd never imagined wanting, this was entirely outside his experience. "Ifan!" Isla spotted him and scrambled off the window seat, running to him with her arms outstretched. He caught her and swung her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck with a giggle. "Hey, princess. What are you reading?" "The Bear book. It's about a bear who loves someone very much and tells them so." Isla's enthusiasm was infectious, and Ethan couldn't help but smile. "Sounds like a good bear." "The best bear," Isla declared. Then, with a seriousness only a 2-year-old could muster, she put her small hands on either side of his face. "Ifan, I love you very much, like the bear." Time stopped. Ethan felt his breath catch, his heart stutter. He looked over Isla's shoulder to Sophia, who had stood up, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Isla, sweetheart," Sophia started, but Ethan shook his head. "I love you too, Isla," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Very much. Like the bear. Isla beamed and kissed his cheek, then wiggled to get down. Mama, I'm hungry. Okay, baby. Let's get you a snack. Sophia moved toward them, and when she passed Ethan, their hands brushed. It was brief, possibly accidental, but the electricity that shot through him at the contact was undeniable. That evening, after Isla had eaten her snack and Sophia had finished her work, Ethan asked them to stay for dinner. It had become a pattern over the past weeks, him finding reasons for them to remain, for the day to stretch a little longer, for the moment they had to leave to be postponed. Sometimes they stayed, sometimes they didn't, but he always asked. Tonight, Sophia hesitated. I should get her home. She needs a proper dinner and bath and… I could make dinner, Ethan offered. Or order something. And there's that bathroom off the sunroom with a large tub. You could give her a bath here if you wanted. Ifan, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He held her gaze, willing her to understand everything he couldn't yet say. Please. Stay. Sophia's resistance crumbled, as it usually did when he asked like that. Okay, but I'm helping with dinner. They ordered pizza, which delighted Isla to no end. She sat at Ethan's enormous dining table, her feet swinging high above the floor, and proceeded to eat an entire slice with impressive determination. Ethan and Sophia sat on either side of her, and it felt so natural, so right, that Ethan had to remind himself this wasn't actually his family, that he had no claim to these moments beyond what Sophia chose to give him. Did you always want to work in business? Sophia asked as they ate, and Ethan appreciated the attempt at normal conversation, at getting to know each other beyond the roles they'd fallen into. No, actually. When I was young, I wanted to be an architect. I loved the idea of designing buildings that would outlast me, that would be part of people's lives for generations. He smiled at the memory. But my father had other plans. He built Blackwood Industries from nothing, and he expected me to take over. So I did. Do you regret it? Ethan considered the question. A month ago, he would have said no without hesitation. But now, looking at Isla's face smeared with pizza sauce, at the way Sophia watched her daughter with infinite tenderness, he wasn't so sure. I don't know, he admitted. I'm good at what I do. I've built something significant. But lately, I've been wondering if I missed something along the way. Something important. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It's never too late to find what you're looking for. Their eyes met, and Ethan wondered if she knew what he'd found. If she understood that he'd been searching his whole life without knowing it, and that the answer had appeared on his doorstep in the rain, small and frightened and perfect. After dinner, Sophia gave Isla a bath while Ethan cleaned up. He could hear them through the open door. Isla's delighted squeals as Sophia made the bath toys talk to each other, Sophia's gentle reminders to wash behind her ears, the splashing and laughter that filled the house with warmth. He found himself drawn to the doorway, unable to resist watching. Sophia glanced up and caught him staring. "Wanna help?" "I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding. Are you Isla? Should Ethan come help with bath time?" "Yes," Isla shouted. "Ifan, come play boats." And so Ethan found himself kneeling beside the tub, his expensive shirt sleeves rolled up, sailing plastic boats with a 2-year-old while her mother laughed at his serious commentary on naval maneuvers. It was absurd and perfect, and when Isla splashed him directly in the face, soaking him completely, he laughed harder than he had in years. Later, after Isla was clean and dry and dressed in the pajamas Sophia now kept in the sunroom, they all ended up in Ethan's living room. Isla climbed into Ethan's lap, damp and smelling of baby shampoo, and demanded a story. "Which one?" Ethan asked, and Isla pointed to a book on the coffee table, one of the dozens he'd bought for her over the past weeks. "The moon one." It was a book about a child asking the moon questions, and as Ethan read, his voice soft and soothing, he felt Isla grow heavy against his chest. By the time he finished, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. "She's out," Sophia whispered from where she sat beside them on the couch. Should I? No, let her rest for a bit. She's comfortable. They sat in the growing darkness, only the lamp in the corner providing light. Ethan could feel Isla's heartbeat against his chest, could smell the lingering scent of Sophia's perfume, could hear the soft sound of Sophia's breathing. And he thought that this quiet moment of peace with these two people was what he'd been missing his entire life. Can I ask you something? Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. Anything. Why are you really doing this? All of this. Letting Isla come here, spending time with us, changing your whole life around. Is it? She paused, and he heard the vulnerability in her voice. Is it because you feel sorry for us? Ethan turned to look at her, careful not to disturb Isla. Is that what you think? I don't know what to think. A month ago, I was just your housekeeper. And now you're reading bedtime stories to my daughter and letting her destroy your home with toys and marker stains. It doesn't make sense unless you pity us. Sophia. He waited until she met his eyes. I don't pity you. I admire you. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You work incredibly hard. You raise an extraordinary child. You somehow manage to maintain your dignity and grace despite everything you've been through. Why would I pity that? Then why? Because you both make me happy. The words came out simply, honestly. Because for the first time in my life, I wake up excited for the day ahead. Because hearing Isla call my name makes me feel like I matter in a way that no business deal ever has. Because watching you with her makes me believe in something good and real and worth protecting. He took a breath. Because I'm falling in love with both of you, and I don't know how to stop, and I'm not sure I want to. Sophia stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, and that creates a power imbalance. I know you might not feel the same way. But you asked why I'm doing this, and that's why. Not pity. Never pity. Love. For a long moment, Sophia didn't speak. Then she reached out and took his free hand, the one that wasn't supporting Isla's sleeping form. I'm falling too, she whispered. I've been trying not to, trying to keep things professional, trying to remember all the reasons this is a bad idea. But every time you make Isla laugh, every time you look at her like she's the most important thing in the world, every time you're kind when you don't have to be, I fall a little more. Ethan's heart felt too big for his chest. So, what do we do? I don't know. Sophia's smile was tremulous. This is all so new, so unexpected. I need to think about Isla, about what's best for her. I can't risk her getting attached if... I'm already attached, Ethan interrupted gently. To both of you. And I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but... Sophia, look at me. He waited until she did. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, keeping people at a distance, never letting anyone close enough to matter. And then you came into my life and Isla, and those walls just crumbled. I don't want to rebuild them. I want this. I want movie nights and pizza dinners and bath time chaos. I want to watch Isla grow up. I want to know what makes you smile, what your dreams are, what you think about when you can't sleep. I want all of it. The good and the messy and the complicated. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it falls apart and Isla ends up hurt? What if it does work? Ethan countered. What if we try this and it's everything neither of us knew we were looking for? Sophia laughed through her tears. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. They sat there, hands clasped, Isla sleeping peacefully between them, and Ethan felt the last piece of his carefully controlled life slip away. And he'd never been more grateful for anything. The shift happened gradually at first, then all at once. Sophia and Isla didn't just visit anymore, they belonged. Ethan had entire sections of his closets cleared to make room for Sophia's work clothes, and Isla's toys migrated from the sunroom to every corner of the house. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, a complete reordering of everything Ethan thought he knew about himself. 2 months after that first night in the rain, Ethan found himself in a situation he'd never imagined, standing in a toy store at 6 in the evening, debating the merits of different stuffed animals with the intensity he usually reserved for merger negotiations. "I think she'd like the elephant," Sophia said, laughing at his serious expression. "She's been talking about elephants since we watched that nature documentary last week." "But the giraffe is bigger," Ethan argued. "And she said her favorite color is yellow." "Ethan, you bought her 5 toys last week. You don't need to buy her anything today." "I know I don't need to. I want to." He picked up both animals. "What if I get both?" Sophia shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're going to spoil her rotten. That's the plan." Ethan grinned and headed for the checkout, both animals in hand. As they walked back to the car, their hands brushed and then linked naturally, as if they'd been holding hands for years instead of weeks. They still hadn't defined what they were to each other. More than employer and employee, certainly, but how much more remained unspoken? Ethan had been giving Sophia space, letting her set the pace, but every day that passed made him more certain that this was forever. "Mrs. Patterson called today," Sophia said as they drove. "She wanted to apologize again. For the 100th time." "She doesn't need to apologize. It wasn't her fault." "I know, but I think she feels guilty. She asked if I'd be bringing Isla back to her." Sophia glanced at him. "I told her no, that we'd found a better arrangement." Ethan's heart swelled. Yeah. Sophia's hand found his on the center console. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. Something important." His pulse quickened. "Okay. Not now. Tonight, after Isla's asleep." She squeezed his hand. "It's not bad. Just important." The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence, but Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. When they arrived home, and when Hattie started thinking of it as home, rather than the house or the estate, Isla came running, having been watched by Mrs. Chun for the afternoon. "Ifan, Mama, you're back." She launched herself at Ethan, who caught her easily. "We are. And we brought you something." Isla's eyes went wide as Ethan revealed the 2 stuffed animals. Her squeal of delight was so loud that Mrs. Chun appeared from the kitchen, smiling at the scene. Thank you. Isla hugged both animals, then Ethan, then Sophia, then the animals again. "I love them so much. What are you going to name them?" Sophia asked. Isla considered this with the gravity of someone naming actual children. "The elephant is Rosie, and the giraffe is Ifan Jr." Ethan burst out laughing. "Ethan Jr.? "Yes. Because he tall like you, and yellow is happy like you." Isla's logic was impeccable in its simplicity. That evening they fell into their routine dinner together, bath time, then stories before bed. Except tonight, Isla insisted that Ethan put her to bed in one of the guest rooms rather than getting ready to go home. "Want to sleep here," she said firmly. "In the princess bed." Ethan looked at Sophia, who bit her lip. They'd avoided overnight stays, some unspoken agreement that it would change things too much. But looking at Isla's hopeful face, then at Sophia's soft expression, Ethan realized that maybe it was time for things to change. "What do you think, Mama?" he asked quietly. Sophia took a breath, then nodded. "Okay, tonight we can have a sleepover." Isla's cheer could probably be heard in the next town. She raced around gathering her things, her pajamas, her toothbrush, Rosie, and Ethan Jr., her favorite blanket. Ethan watched her with a smile that felt permanent on his face. He read to her until she fell asleep, her small hand clutching his finger. When he finally managed to extract himself from her grip, he found Sophia waiting in the hallway, her expression nervous but determined. "Living room?" she asked. "Living room," he agreed. They settled on the couch where they'd spent so many evenings, but tonight felt different. Charged somehow. Sophia tucked her legs under her and turned to face him. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she began. "About what this is, what it could be. And I realized I've been scared. Not of you, but of wanting this too much." Ethan reached for her hand. "I'm scared too." "You are?" "Terrified." He smiled ruefully. "I've never done this before, Sophia. I've never wanted someone the way I want you. I've never looked at a child and felt my heart just expand the way it does with Isla. I don't know the rules or the right way to do this. All I know is that when I'm with you both, everything makes sense in a way it never has before." Sophia's eyes shimmered. "My marriage failed because Michael wanted the idea of a family more than the reality. When things got hard, when Isla cried at 3 in the morning, when life wasn't Instagram perfect, he checked out. And I'm scared that I'm not him." Ethan's voice was firm. "I'm not going to run when things get hard. I'm not going to bail when Isla has a tantrum or gets sick or becomes a difficult teenager. I'm in this, Sophia. All the way in." "How can you be so sure? You've never even wanted kids before." "I didn't know I wanted kids before. There's a difference." Ethan shifted closer. "I look at Isla, and I see this perfect little human who trusts me, who loves me, who makes me want to be better than I am. And I look at you, and I see strength and grace, and so much love it takes my breath away. You're both teaching me how to be human, how to feel things I've spent my whole life avoiding. Why wouldn't I want that?" Sophia was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "I'm in love with you. I've been trying not to be, trying to protect myself and Isla, but I can't help it. I love you." Ethan's heart stopped, then started again, beating harder than before. "Say it again." "I love you, Ethan Blackwood." "I love you too, Sophia Martinez. I love you so much it scares me. I love you, and I love Isla, and I want—" He stopped, suddenly nervous. "I want everything with you. Marriage, more kids if you want them, growing old together. All of it. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but when you know, right?" Sophia laughed through her tears. "Did you just propose?" "Not officially. That deserves something better than me rambling on a couch." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "But yes, eventually. If you'll have me, whenever you're ready." "I might be ready sooner than you think," Sophia whispered, and then she was kissing him, and Ethan forgot how to breathe, how to think, how to be anything except completely, utterly hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them learning each other. But it deepened quickly, weeks of suppressed longing finally finding release. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "So we're doing this?" he asked. "Really doing this?" "We're really doing this." Sophia smiled. "You're my daughter's favorite person, you know. She talks about you constantly when you're not around. If Fan said this, if Fan did that. You've become her whole world. She's become mine too. You both have." They stayed up late into the night, talking about everything, their fears, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Sophia told him about her childhood, about her parents who'd passed away before Isla was born, about the loneliness she'd felt as a single mother. Ethan told her about the pressure of being the Blackwood heir, about the expectations that had shaped his life, about the emptiness he'd felt despite all his success. "I used to think success meant the biggest deal, the most money, the highest profile," Ethan said. "But now I think it means Isla calling my name when she wakes up. It means you trusting me enough to let me into your life. It means family dinners and bedtime stories and all the small, perfect moments I never knew I was missing." "You've changed so much since that night in the rain," Sophia observed. "Or maybe you just finally became yourself. Maybe both." Ethan pulled her closer. "I know this is complicated. I'm still your employer, technically. We should probably figure that out." "I've been thinking about that too." Sophia took a breath. "What if I stopped working as your housekeeper? You could hire someone else, and I don't know, go back to school maybe? I never finished my degree. Or I could look for a different job, something with more normal hours so I could spend more time with Isla. Or, Ethan said carefully, you could just be Isla's mom.
Full time.
If that's what you want. Sophia pulled back to look at him. Ethan, I can't let you support us. That's not. Why not? If we're building a life together, if we're going to be a family, then my resources are your resources. Our resources. And honestly, Sophia, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why shouldn't it go toward giving you and Isla the life you deserve? Because I need to take care of myself. I need to contribute. You do contribute. You contribute everything that matters. Ethan took her hands. But I understand. So how about this? You stop working as the housekeeper, but you take over some of the household management. Mrs. Chun is ready to retire anyway. You could oversee the staff, manage the household operations, and still have time for school or whatever else you want to do. It would be a real position with a real salary, but you wouldn't be cleaning my toilets anymore. Sophia laughed despite herself. You've really thought about this. I've thought about everything when it comes to you and Isla. I want to make this work, whatever it takes. They talked until nearly 2 a.m, planning and dreaming and slowly building the framework of their future. When Sophia finally yawned so widely her jaw cracked, Ethan insisted she take the other guest room rather than drive home exhausted. This is becoming a habit, she said, but she didn't protest when he showed her to the room next to Isla's. Good, Ethan said, and kissed her softly. Maybe it should be. That night, Ethan lay in his bed, the same bed where he'd slept alone for years, and listened to the sounds of his house. He could hear Isla's soft snoring through the wall, the gentle creak of Sophia moving around in her room, the house settling around them all. And he realized that this was what home sounded like. Not silence, not emptiness, but life, messy and beautiful and real. The next morning, he woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes. Following the scent to the kitchen, he found Sophia at the stove and Isla at the table, both still in their pajamas. Isla saw him first. Ifan, Mama, making pancakes. You want some? I definitely want some. He moved to Sophia, and she turned into his arms naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years. Good morning, she murmured against his chest. The best morning, he replied, and meant it with everything in him. They ate breakfast as the sun streamed through the windows, and Ethan looked at the two people sharing his table and realized he'd been searching for this his entire life. Not success, not power, not wealth. Just this, a little girl with syrup in her hair, a woman who'd taught him how to love, and a future full of ordinary, extraordinary moments. Later, after breakfast, Isla was playing in the sunroom when she suddenly appeared in the doorway where Ethan and Sophia were talking. Are you my daddy now? She asked Ethan with the directness only children possess. The question stopped time. Ethan looked at Sophia, who had tears in her eyes, then back at Isla. Would you want me to be? He asked carefully. Isla considered this, then nodded firmly.
Yes.
Because daddies love you and take care of you and read stories and give hugs. And you do all those things. Ethan knelt down to her level. Then yes, sweetheart. If it's okay with your mama, I'd really like to be your daddy. Isla launched herself into his arms. You're my daddy, she announced to the world, and Ethan held her tight, this child who'd saved him without even trying and let himself cry for the first time in 20 years. 6 months later, the Blackwood estate had been completely transformed. Not structurally, though Ethan had installed a playground in the backyard and converted another room into a proper playroom, but atmospherically. It felt lived in now, loved, a real home instead of a showpiece. Ethan stood in his study, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time, his hands uncharacteristically nervous. Through the window, he could see the setup on the back lawn. White chairs arranged in neat rows, Flowers everywhere, a small arch covered in roses where he would soon stand and make the most important commitment of his life. "You're fidgeting," said a voice from the doorway. James, his best friend and only groomsman, leaned against the frame with an amused smile. "I've never seen you fidget." "I'm not fidgeting. I'm adjusting."
Right.
Adjusting. For the 10th time. James walked into the room and clapped him on the shoulder. "You're nervous." "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good at being a husband? A father?" "Ethan, you've been being a father for months now. And from what I've seen, you're pretty damn good at it." James smiled. "Besides, do you really think Sophia would be marrying you if she had any doubts?" Before Ethan could answer, the door burst open and Isla ran in, her flower girl dress a confection of pink tulle and ribbons. At nearly 3 now, she was all energy and attitude and opinions. "Daddy, Daddy, look at my dress." She spun, and Ethan's heart clenched at the word she now used so naturally. 3 months ago, after many conversations and some legal paperwork, he'd officially adopted her. The day the judge had finalized it, making her legally his daughter, had been the second best day of his life. Today would be the first. "You look beautiful, princess. The most beautiful flower girl ever." "I know." Isla's confidence was absolute. "Daddy, why you so nervous? Mama says you love her lots, so it's okay." Out of the mouths of babes. Ethan scooped her up. "You're right. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Can I see Mama now? I want to show her my dress again." "Not yet, sweetheart. You'll see her at the ceremony. That's the rule." Isla pouted, but accepted this. "Okay. But after, we're going to have cake, right?" Mrs. Chun said there's cake. "There's definitely cake."
Good.
Satisfied, Isla wiggled to get down and ran off, presumably to check on the cake situation herself. James laughed. "That kid is going to run circles around you. She already does." Ethan couldn't keep the love out of his voice. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "Second best," James corrected. "The best thing is about to walk down that aisle." He was right. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood under the rose arch, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The chairs were filled with friends, business associates, and several staff members who'd become family over the past months. Mrs. Chun sat in the front row, crying happy tears already. James stood beside him, steady and supportive. Then the music started, and Isla appeared, concentrating fiercely on her job of scattering rose petals. She took it very seriously, placing each petal with care, and the guests' indulgent laughter followed her down the aisle. When she reached Ethan, she whispered loudly, "I did good, Daddy. You did perfect, baby girl." Isla took her place beside James, and then everyone stood as Sophia appeared. Ethan's breath left his body. She was wearing a simple white dress, elegant and understated, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. But it wasn't the dress or the flowers she carried that made her beautiful. It was the way she looked at him, with so much love and trust and joy that he felt unworthy of it even as he vowed to spend his life earning it. She'd chosen to walk down the aisle alone, needing no one to give her away because she was giving herself freely, choosing this, choosing him, choosing them. And when she reached him and took his hands, Ethan saw his entire future in her eyes. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Ethan's turn, he took a breath and spoke from the heart. "Sophia, 6 months ago, I thought I knew what my life was supposed to be. Success, achievement, building an empire. And then you walked into my life, and you showed me what I was really building toward. This. A family. A home. A love that makes everything else meaningless in comparison." His voice cracked slightly. "You've taught me how to be human, how to feel, how to love. You and Isla have given me everything I didn't know I was missing. I promise to protect you both, to cherish you, to be the man and father you both deserve. I promise to read bedtime stories and make pancakes and be there for every moment, big and small. I promise to love you, both of you, for the rest of my life and beyond." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience, and Sophia was crying openly. When it was her turn, she squeezed his hands tightly. "Ethan, when you found Isla in the rain that night, you didn't just save her. You saved me too. You showed me that it was okay to hope again, to trust again, to believe in love again. You've been so patient with me, so understanding, so willing to be exactly what we needed." She smiled through her tears. "You didn't just accept my daughter. You loved her as your own. You became her father in every way that matters. And you became my best friend, my partner, my home. I promise to stand beside you, to support your dreams, to be your safe place to land. I promise to love you with everything I am, for all of our days." When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan pulled Sophia into his arms and kissed her with all the love and promise and gratitude he felt. The guests erupted in applause, but he barely heard them. All he could focus on was the woman in his arms, his wife, the love of his life. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Blackwood."
Daddy.
"Mama, can we do the cake now?" Isla's voice broke through the moment, and they pulled apart laughing. "Yes, princess," Ethan said, scooping her up while keeping one arm around Sophia. "Now we can do the cake." The reception was held on the lawn, simple and elegant and full of joy. Ethan danced with Sophia for their first dance, then with Isla, who stood on his shoes and giggled as he waltzed her around. He gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry, thanking his wife for showing him what mattered and his daughter for teaching him how to love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ethan found a quiet moment with his new family. They sat on a bench at the edge of the lawn, Isla between them, all of them watching their guests celebrate. "Happy?" Sophia asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it." Ethan kissed the top of her head, then Isla's. "6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be here, married to an amazing woman with a daughter I love more than my own life, I would have thought they were crazy. But you are here," Sophia said softly. "We all are. Together." "Together," Ethan repeated, and the word felt like a promise, a prayer, a truth more profound than any he'd known before. Isla yawned and snuggled deeper between them. "Daddy, when we have baby brothers and sisters, will you love them too?" Ethan and Sophia exchanged glances. They'd talked about having more children, but not yet, not openly with Isla. "Of course I will," Ethan said. "Do you want brothers and sisters, sweetheart?"
Yes.
"Lots of them. So I can be the big sister and teach them things and share my toys. Sometimes."
She paused.
"Can we have a baby soon?" Sophia laughed. "We'll see, baby. Maybe someday soon." "Okay." Satisfied, Isla closed her eyes.
"Love you, Daddy."
"Love you, Mama." "Love you too, Princess," they said in unison, and then Sophia's hand found Ethan's over their daughter's head. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and the party continued behind them, Ethan thought about the journey that had brought him here. It had started with fear and rain and a child's trust. It had grown through pancakes and bedtime stories and quiet moments of connection. And it had blossomed into this, a family, a love, a life more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. He'd spent 34 years building walls, keeping people out, convinced that success was measured in dollars and deals and power. But sitting here with his sleeping daughter and his wife beside him, he finally understood what success really meant. It meant coming home to people who loved you. It meant being someone's safe place. It meant small hands clutching yours and big moments built from tiny ones. It meant finding your family in the rain and building a life that felt like home. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, This woman who'd changed everything, who'd shown him how to live instead of just exist. I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest man alive. I'm thinking that the best decision I ever made was opening my door that night. I'm thinking. He paused, emotions swelling in his chest. I'm thinking that I can't wait to spend the rest of my life loving you and Isla. And maybe, someday, a few more little ones running around. Sophia smiled. A few more? Or a lot more? I'm open to negotiation. He grinned. I've discovered I'm very good at the family thing. Who knew? I knew, Sophia said. From the moment I saw you holding Isla that first night, soaked and terrified but so gentle with her, I knew you had this in you. You just needed the right reason to let it out. You're my reason. Both of you. Ethan carefully shifted Isla so he could pull Sophia closer. Everything good in my life starts and ends with you too. They sat there as the reception wound down, as guests began to leave with well wishes and happy tears, as Mrs. Chin came to tell them she'd prepared the master suite for them and would put Isla to bed in her room. And through it all, Ethan held his family close and thanked whatever force had brought them together. Later that night, after Isla had been tucked into bed with Rosie and Ethan Jr., after the last guest had left and the house had fallen quiet, Ethan and Sophia stood on the balcony off their bedroom, looking out at the estate that had become a home. I have something for you, Ethan said, and pulled out a small box. Inside was a delicate necklace with a pendant that held 3 stones, a sapphire for Isla's birthstone, a ruby for Sophia's, and a diamond for his own. Ethan, it's beautiful, Sophia breathed as he fastened it around her neck. It's us, he said simply. The 3 of us, together. Always. Sophia turned in his arms, and the look in her eyes made his heart race. Always, she agreed. Through everything. Through everything, he promised. The good days and the hard ones. The laughter and the tears. The bedtime battles and the teenage years. All of it. You know what you're signing up for? Sophia teased. Isla's going to be a handful as she gets older. I'm counting on it. She gets it from her mother. Sophia laughed and swatted his arm, but then she grew serious. Thank you, Ethan, for saving us that night, for choosing us every day since, for being the father Isla deserves and the partner I always dreamed of. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart and your daughter, for teaching me what love really means. He kissed her softly, for making me whole. They stood there wrapped in each other's arms as the moon rose higher, silver light bathing the estate in a gentle glow. And somewhere in the house, their daughter slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams 3-year-olds dream, secure in the knowledge that she was loved beyond measure. Ethan thought back to that night in the rain, to the tiny, frightened child on his doorstep, to the moment when his carefully controlled world had shattered and remade itself into something infinitely better. He'd thought he was saving her, but the truth was far simpler and more profound. She'd saved him. They both had. And now, standing here with his wife in his arms and his daughter sleeping down the hall, Ethan Blackwood finally understood what it meant to be rich. Not in money or power or success, but in the things that actually mattered: love, family, and the ordinary magic of coming home to the people who made life worth living. Happy wedding day, Mrs. Blackwood, he murmured. Happy wedding day, Mr. Blackwood, Sophia replied. Here's to the rest of our lives. To the rest of our lives, Ethan agreed. And to every beautiful, chaotic, perfect moment to come. They kissed under the stars, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, who'd built a family from trust and hope and love. And in that kiss was a promise, not just of today or tomorrow, but of always. Of choosing each other through every storm. Of being each other's home. The rain had brought them together, but love would keep them that way, through every season, every challenge, every beautiful moment of the life they were building together. And in a house that had once echoed with emptiness, laughter now rang through the halls, Proof that the greatest treasures aren't found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the hearts of the people who choose to love you, rain or shine, now and always.